The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Oh, good morning, everybody, and welcome to China's Digital Consumer 2020. This is our webinar series, and today I'm joined by Mary Kernohan from Snapdragon Monitoring. We're going to be talking about counterfeiting and IP theft, fighting back. You should be able to see Mary and myself on the webcams here, and just to make sure that you can, if everybody could give me a virtual hands up, you should have a little hand button on your panel. That will let me know that you can hear and see us before we get started. I see a couple of hands, so that's great. Thank you very much. And I've also circled our questions box here. Please do ask questions throughout. We want to make this a really interactive webinar and have a nice Q&A at the end. Do ask Mary lots of questions, whether you think it's particularly relevant to the content of this webinar or not. We will come to the questions at the end and try to answer all of those for you. A little bit about CBBC for those of you who don't know. CBBC, we are the China-Britain Business Council. We're the leading organisation supporting UK-China trade. Here in the UK, we have about 40 employees across the regions in the country and across a variety of industry sectors. And here on the consumer team, we support the agriculture, food and drink, and the retail sectors. Over in China, we have 13 offices across the country. That's covering all of the Tier 1 cities, Beijing, Shanghai, Shenzhen, and Guangzhou, and also the second and third tier cities as well. And our wonderful China team over there are supporting businesses on the ground, breaking into or developing their China market. Now, as I said, this is our China Digital Consumer webinar series, so we have lots of webinars coming up. You can listen to previous recorded webinars on the CBBC YouTube channel. You can access that through the website. And here are some of our upcoming webinars in May. So we'll be hearing from Connect Plus, and they're going to be talking about cross-border social commerce. We'll also be hearing from Crayfish on the 19th on B2B digital marketing. And later on in June, we will be hearing from ChemLinked as well. There's lots more as well on the website, so do have a look and please do sign up. It's free to register. Also here at CBC, we're offering a free 30-minute video consultation with our CMBAs. You can find more information about this opportunity on the website under Events, China Business Clinics. But without further ado, let me introduce you to our speaker for today. This is Mary Kernohan. She is the Head of Nurture at Snapdragon Monitoring. In her role as Head of Nurture at Snapdragon Monitoring, Mary works with brands on a daily basis, helping them to find solutions to tackle online sales of counterfeit goods using registered intellectual property. Mary is one of the founding members of the Snapdragon team, and she has been instrumental in its growth and success, which now sees the company defending businesses of all sizes globally. So I'm very, very excited to welcome Mary today, and I'll hand it over to you, Mary.
Thank you very much, Maxime. That's great. And welcome everybody to this webinar. Welcome also to Scotland, if you're not in Scotland. So I'm just going to do the technical bit to start with to make sure that you can see my screen, which I hope you can, all being well. I'm sure, Maxime, you will let me know if that's not being seen by everybody. That's great. So we're definitely on.
It's not full yet, but we can see it.
So I'm just about to put it onto full screen now, and hopefully that's it.
Looks great.
So yeah, thank you, Maxime, and thank you very much to CBBC and for inviting us to be part of this webinar, and to you all for giving up your time today to attend this session. As Maxime said, I'm Mary Kernohan, Head of Nurture at Snapdragon. In terms of what we do at Snapdragon, we provide online brand protection. And to do that, we use innovative technology and a fantastic team, multilingual team, to find and eliminate brand abuse on the world's busiest online marketplaces, auction sites, social media channels. Basically, anything online is where we are active. We grew out of defending our own brand many moons ago, which was heavily counterfeited. Our founder, Rachel Jones, had a brand which she took to market, discovered it was being copied, and it was her whole portfolio of intellectual property that was being abused. So she fought back and was very successful, and from that Snapdragon grew. So we very much have first-hand experience of a lot of what I'm going to cover in this session, and certainly from the intellectual property side of things, I'll be talking about that in more detail later on. So I'm going to share some of what we're learning in the fast-changing world we live and work in, and offer some advice on how brands can be protected online. I hope it will be of benefit, both short-term, as we go through these strange times that we're in currently, but also for the longer term as your brands grow and develop. So, oops, just going back one slide there. Oops, there we go. So as a way of introduction, the production and sale of counterfeits has serious economic ramifications for a business. During these current challenging times, brand protection for many is almost needed more than ever, because consumers, from their perspective, they're finding that scarcity of products, urgency for specific things, and unfamiliarity with what they're buying, as well as where they're buying from. If they're used to normally going to shops and now they're turning to the online market, they're not necessarily familiar with certain platforms and so on. And also a fear of missing out on a bargain. All of those things for the consumer can drive the unassuming consumer to buy a fake product. So at Snapdragon, we want to make sure that you are prepared to protect your customers and your brand reputation and your revenue streams. And many brands are already doing this. And if you're one of those today, hopefully this session will be a reassuring checklist, and that will be a very positive thing. And if it, hopefully, if there are some things that you're not doing, there'll be things you can learn from this. So first of all, let's take a little look at the scale of the issue. The statistics are very grim. Trade in counterfeit goods is now 3.3% of global trade and rising. And somebody said to me that that equates to the value of world tourism in pre-COVID days. Obviously, tourism is slumping at the moment, but when you think of world tourism pre-COVID, global trade of counterfeit goods, it equates to that. So it's a significant portion of global trade. In the pharmaceutical industry, according to the World Health Organization, 50% of drugs and medicines bought online are fake. And the value of imported fake goods has now risen to over 509 billion US dollars. In the European Union, counterfeit trade represents 6.8% of imports, which is worth up to 85 billion euros. And in the UK alone, this illicit trade costs the economy over £9 billion in lost revenue. And that's £4 billion in unpaid tax, because obviously people that are selling counterfeits are not paying tax. And if we can think about what that £4 billion could do if it was put into society, that's, yeah, there are many ways in which that money could be spent. I find these figures really quite hard to grasp, but what I do take from them is that the problem is vast and it's global as well. The majority of fake goods, around 83%, originate in mainland China and in Hong Kong. And they are not the only places by any means. Other major points of origin include the United Arab Emirates, Turkey, Singapore, Thailand, and India. But that is not an exhaustive list either. An OECD report looked at economies where intellectual property rights holders have their headquarters registered. And these are the losers. So the people that are suffering as a result of, or the brands, if you like, that are suffering as a result of the counterfeit selling. And almost a quarter of the total value of seized product refers to IP rights holders registered in the United States. So the biggest losers are very much the brand owners in the US, followed very closely by France, Italy, Switzerland, Germany, and the UK is in there too. A growing number of businesses in Singapore and Hong Kong, Brazil, and China are also becoming targets. So even in the places where perhaps things might be originating, a lot of fantastic brands are suffering as well. Whilst brands in the US suffer most by counterfeiting, fakes do and can affect brands from just about anywhere around the globe. Counterfeiters do not discriminate by territory, and neither do they discriminate when it comes to the products they copy, and the problem threatens just about every consumer sector. So for every fake Gucci handbag, there's a fake box of washing powder. For every dodgy North Face jacket, there are countless counterfeit baby teethers, bottles of whiskey, toys. No sector is left untouched. And counterfeiters make unsavory bedfellows. This is something you may already know, but if it doesn't, it's horrifying. Counterfeiting is often linked to other forms of organized criminal activity, from poor working conditions for employees to child labor, environmental pollution, human trafficking, modern slavery, drug trafficking, and even terrorism. Counterfeiting goes hand in hand with types of activity that brands do not want to be associated with. And I say brands, neither do platforms and other forms of digital and online selling areas. And we can see how nimble the counterfeiters are. Even during the current COVID-19 crisis, we've seen a fast spike in the online sale of protective clothing, face masks, testing kits, supposed treatments, hand sanitizer, even sports equipment, as people seek to keep themselves fit. And you wouldn't be able to move volumes of counterfeited goods around the world unless there was an organized operation facilitating it. The increase in popularity of many popular brands is often quickly followed by an increase in levels of counterfeiting. And as I say, COVID-19 has presented examples of that most recently, but this is true and something that we often find. We can be at a trade show, new products are launched, they become very popular, and very quickly they are being counterfeited, sometimes in a matter of weeks, we've experienced. So it's often assumed that counterfeiting is only a problem for big brands, and historically this started with luxury products. But a quick check on online marketplaces instantly shows that smaller companies are also being copied, and brands of all sizes and products of all values are under attack by copycats who infiltrate the supply chain. So just as more and more consumers shop online, typically eBay and Amazon in the West, but different territories have platforms that people turn to first, these consumers are now also turning to platforms like AliExpress, DHgate, and Wish, where mostly illicit sellers offer extremely low prices for all sorts of goods. These platforms, and increasingly social media too, are rife with fakes. We see this every day. And every sector, as I've already said, is hit. So baby products, toys, outdoor gear, clothing, cycling, fitness things, beauty, luxury, the list goes on and on. Basically anything can be counterfeited and is. And where the products are now available is extending to, which goes back to the point I was making about the counterfeiters being really nimble and almost being one step ahead of the rest of us who are working to catch up. So the question is, are all the suspicious listings that we see online really offering counterfeits? And in short, for the most part, the answer is yes. It can be hard to ascertain if there is truly a counterfeit product behind an online listing. It's often the case that sellers try to ride the coattails of successful brands and they steal images, infringing copyright, or the reputation of the brand name, infringing a trademark, to sell a similar or a related product without actually manufacturing a branded counterfeit. But these kinds of infringements of intellectual property are still a threat, and they do still potentially pose a danger to consumers and most certainly to the reputation and the revenue streams of the brand. And illicit sellers are certainly offering counterfeit goods. We do know, obviously, because we're fighting it every day. And they're either made to order, which you can see on many of the platforms, or the products are available in sitting stock. So they're sitting in warehouses around the world, ready to be dispatched when purchases are made. How do we know that there are so many counterfeits? Well, one way is because a brief look at consumer reviews reveals that photos of direct counterfeits are being unboxed and unwrapped in homes around the globe. So we all know there's a problem there. And what is the impact of this on a business? The production and sale of counterfeits has serious ramifications for businesses and puts them under significant threat. They divert revenue, they damage brand reputation, and they put consumers at risk. The sale of goods diverts revenue from the rightful recipients, so they're lost sales. But beyond that, as consumers experience quality problems with fake goods, the legitimate brand's customer service team and warranty costs also climb. Because when they get phone calls, and this is something that was experienced with Rachel's brand, when they get complaints from consumers who've unassumingly bought a product that turns out to be a fake, they turn to the brand to recompense them, and the brand, not wanting to lose face or wanting to ensure that they maintain that customer loyalty to the brand, is the one that's left to pick up the pieces, and hence the warranty costs and so on climb. But also when the counterfeits and infringing listings are selling their wares, they have a lower price in nearly every case, not always, but often, and that puts a downward pressure on the price of the legitimate product. So the end consumer, by supporting the buying of the fakes, is really sort of helping to drive the prices down. Everybody wants things cheap, and so on. Developing a product and a reputation, as many brand owners are very aware, takes time and money and a huge amount of effort. And counterfeiters bypass all of this hard work, and they make a profit on the back of it. And what's more, they produce products that lack the quality and the durability of genuine goods and risk damaging a brand's reputation when sold to unsuspecting customers. Aside from the disappointment of pure imitations, these items can be extremely dangerous. Brands put a huge amount of effort into having products tested to ensure that they meet safety regulations for different territories that they sell into. And these are generally not followed by counterfeiters. So they're dangerous. There are low quality paints, for example, that can be toxic. Glues and dyes also can be toxic. poor electrical wiring in products can lead to electric shocks. The general quality of a brand, it can be very, very poor. And when products are relied on for safety, whether that be part of machinery or some kind of mechanical component, whether they be outdoor gear, toys, baby products, beauty products, this can be fatal and very, very damaging indeed. So why do people buy fakes? 37% of fakes are deemed to be dangerous to health and safety of consumers. And I said at the beginning that 50% of pharmaceuticals are known to be fakes when they're bought online. Someone suggested to me, and I thought this really resonated, that if an aeroplane had a 37% chance of crashing, or even a 50% chance of crashing, would you board? We all know the answer to that, maybe, even the higher risk takers among us. But it is a serious thought. So why do people buy fakes? Well, there are a wide variety of reasons why consumers may buy a counterfeit product online. And a lot of fakes, as I've already said, are purchased unknowingly. However, the crux of the issue is that for the most part, fakes are cheaper than the real products they imitate. And this perceived bargain will always be the #1 draw to the counterfeits, be this for knowing or unknowing consumers. Fake goods are cheap for a reason. There are no design costs, labour practices are often unregulated, and technical development is non-existent. So with some brands, consumers may be prepared to buy a fake to gain the prestige of the brand name and design. And I've seen this with my own son, who quite likes certain fashion labels. And I know for a fact he can't afford to buy the genuine product, and yet he seems to end up with sweatshirts. And I question where he's purchased these from. So he's certainly one example of a young person wanting to gain the prestige of the brand name and design without paying a higher retail price. But whilst fakes are often subpar in fit and quality and function, the perceived and for the most part real risk behind some fakes does not serve as a deterrent for many. They're still happy to get on that plane because they believe that there is no high risk to safety. And some products, there is a less of a risk with certain clothing items. If it is a sweatshirt, there's not necessarily a risk to safety. Whereas if you were buying an outdoor jacket or crampons to go climbing, that would pose a bigger threat. Of course, many consumers do want the real thing, and many brands have built loyal followings through sophisticated marketing campaigns and commitment to quality and superb customer service. But the issue remains that as the market has become more mainstream for many sectors, many consumers want the brand prestige, but they aren't prepared to spend the brand's price. So what can be done about the problem? There are 2 lines of action. 1, prevent the issue getting out of hand in the first instance as best you can. And 2, proactively defend against the attack on your brand when it does happen. And the emphasis there being very much proactive defense. So taking the first of these, in terms of prevention, there are 3 pillars. First, make yourself a difficult target. And this is where the intellectual property comes in, which we at Snapdragon are very passionate about. So first is to prepare and secure your brand, most vitally, register intellectual property. And I assume that for the brands out there, you know a good intellectual property lawyer or attorney. But if you don't, please email me or call me. My details will be up at the end of the presentation, and I can introduce you to somebody relevant to your territory and your sector and so on. So brands using trademarks. The trademarks, particularly word marks, that is the actual written term as opposed to the logo and figure, allow you as a brand to enforce against copycats using your name with far greater ease. And we find, when protecting our fabulous clients and customers, that the registered word mark, as well as the logo, therefore a combined mark, word and logo, usually gives stronger rights. If a brand only has the logo or figure, there's less we can do if the name of the brand is being used in the seller description, whereas if they've got the word and the logo, we tend to find we can be more effective there. So trademarking your brand name and logo offers great return on investment, and we would always recommend that people consider this really seriously for their brands. But the key thing with trademark registration is to ensure that you register in all the relevant territories and the correct product classes. And we've had a number of folks that we've worked with who may have done some trademark registration at the beginning of their brand journey, and as their brand has grown and developed, they've not kept that trademark portfolio fresh, and their product range has expanded, but they haven't adjusted the classes, and they found that there's a bit of catching up to do. They've been caught short because they don't have their latest range of products registered in the right classes. So that's certainly an important thing to consider. And you can expand this slightly too, to include securing social media handles and domain names. So with domain names, securing a large portfolio of domains can be important for a brand owner because it can help to reduce cyber squatters who might want to take that domain. On the other hand, there are hundreds of domains options, so it's perhaps not realistic to think you can buy them all. So register the domains that include your brand name or registered trademark, and include as many variations as you think is necessary and can afford. With social media, by registering social media handles on Instagram and Twitter, you can also prevent fraudsters from passing themselves off as the real deal. And where pertinent, you may also wish to register unique designs or patents to strengthen your protection against copycats stealing your aesthetics and inventions without your branding. So again, that's something people may create their own product which uses your design rights or your patent. They're not using your branding, but there's still action that can be taken because of that design theft. So it's very common that counterfeits will be listed using official images as well. And this makes them appear real or of higher quality than they are. And this is where using copyright comes in. Copyright, as many of you may already know, is the global unregistered intellectual property right that can be very useful in enforcing against the misuse of your images online. And in some cases, it can be enforced against the theft of your designs to limit damage. Many consumers are duped by pictures of legitimate products, and they buy a product, and when it arrives, they realize it's nothing like the thing they saw in the picture because it wasn't the thing in the picture. So what we would recommend there is to change your images as often as your budget allows and keep refreshing them. And to remember also to keep a complete archive of all your marketing materials and images, including the products no longer on the market, because counterfeiters sometimes can turn to using old stock. And again, if you've got all that intelligence at your fingertips, action can be taken. So the second area of prevention is to educate your customers and to build brand loyalty through information, and let your customers know that you are busy protecting them. So whilst revealing that you have fakes may seem like a risk, and it's certainly something people don't rush into doing, it will strengthen your brand long term. If you tell your customers where they can buy real products and vitally where to avoid buying them from, that can only be a good thing. And this is a strategy many brands already adopt, with dedicated pages on their website highlighting how to avoid buying a counterfeit. And one poll that we came across revealed that over 3/4 of consumers, I think the total was actually 76%, would be less likely to buy products from a brand if their reputation was associated with counterfeit goods, because I think they became nervous as consumers about purchasing something that could potentially be fake. And you can also show your customers why a £50 or a $50 or €50 fake product is not better value than your £500, dollar or euro one. Telling the story of your product, explaining the hard work that you've gone into, the skilled labor you use, the resulting salaries you offer to your staff that goes into each product, will hopefully build your credibility and extend your credibility, and drive people to buy the genuine product. At the end of the day, the online consumer clicks a button and expects your product. So tell them why the real one is worth it, and tell them why the fake one isn't, because otherwise they may not find out on their own until they've made that purchase and are unwrapping it, unpacking it in their home. So in response to stagnating revenue, we've worked with some clients who are taking e-commerce in-house and building exclusivity through limited runs and collaborations and a selective retail network. For some of our clients, perhaps some of the bigger brands, we found that they, and this happens actually with all brands of all sizes, that brands with online selling tend to feel they're losing control of how sales are going, and they don't know who's selling what, where, they don't know who's genuine. They really feel they've lost control, and part of what we do is try and help them gain that control back. And one way to do this is, as I say, by taking e-commerce back in-house and building exclusivity with selective retail networks and with limited runs and so on. And this can have a positive impact on fighting fakes. It gives you firmer control of online selling, and it makes it far easier for you as a brand to understand and monitor your distribution network. And for consumers who expect to pay more for a bespoke and exclusive retail experience, that is beneficial too. So hopefully less and less of the target market, your target market, will have an interest in scrolling through all the drop shipping e-commerce sites replicas, because they will be going to the only things that are available, which is the genuine stock. And the third area is to secure your supply chain. And this is vital too. This becomes sort of offline, really. Gather as much information as possible about your supplier, wherever their factory or manufacturing base is. Where you can, visit your factory. Obviously, that's very difficult, in fact, impossible at the moment. But it's something that is important to build and maintain relationships with your manufacturers, and to have a specific point of contact that you can get to know and work with great integrity there. The other really important issue is, before discussing any matters pertaining to intellectual property with anyone, be sure to sign a non-disclosure agreement. And I think in China these are called NNNs. NNN. I've been at trade shows where different manufacturers have been wandering around the trade show talking to various brands, and it's extraordinary how much people will give away about their product, and that can be a real risk. So the non-disclosure agreement is very important. A good relationship with your distributors is essential here too. Many of our clients are tipped off by their distributors regarding counterfeits, because it's the distributors who are on the ground, if you like, in different territories. It is, of course, of interest to them to remove fake goods from sales. So hopefully by having that good relationship with distributors, who've got good relationships with their wholesalers. It's in everybody's interests to be open and to work together in the fight against counterfeiters. And once your product is on the move, register your trademarks with customs agencies in the different territories that you are distributing your product to. Customs and border control around the world can also be a vital partner to stop illicit imports. Another area of the supply chain that can be really valuable is to secure secret features that distinguish your products from knockoffs. You can put secret tells into your product, and these can be very wide-ranging. On the more technical side, some brands use microscopic dots and stamp codes on packaging. Some use RFID systems, which is radio frequency identification in the product, and others use hologram stickers. And there are many, many more that are constantly being developed to try and stay ahead of the counterfeiters and the bad guys. But the solutions don't need to be cutting edge technology. It can be something as simple as sewing a particular color thread into a fabric, and that can be one of the signs that can identify a fake. So in terms of proactively defending against online attack of your brand, and where folks like Snapdragon come in, find out firstly whether you have a problem, and if you do, where your problem is. If you don't, that's fantastic. What we do recommend there is you check again in a few months. It's worth keeping an eye on the situation. I've said a number of times things are moving fast in the world we live in, and this is certainly true of fakes with things might seem okay 1 month, but a few months later they're not. Employing an online brand protection strategy doesn't need to be expensive, and once it's been implemented, it can offer you reassurance and save you vital resources. Software has made the monitoring and detection of counterfeits effective, efficient, and affordable. And proprietary algorithms, such as the one we use, can be employed by brands and you to proactively identify fakes and copies. So you're the first to see what's happening when it's emerging. And think about where you're likely to be most affected globally, but also where you can be most effective. So this loops back to the intellectual property portfolio. If you've got trademarks registered in the UK, Europe, the US, and China, but you don't have anything in South America, you're less likely to be effective in South America than you are in the territories you do have the intellectual property registered. And that can be an interesting exercise in itself, because exposing those gaps can help support you in terms of further registration if it's needed. For some brands, the issue of where they're being affected is so extensive that it's vital to set priorities, and this would be focusing in on the biggest offenders, offering the greatest number of counterfeit goods in the most highly trafficked venues. And it's the high volume, the high value areas that should be identified and addressed first. And listings online can be identified using various searching mechanisms. So firstly, you can use your trademark to search, so who's using your trademark, and also to look at typos of your trademark, because sometimes things can be a little bit lost in translation, intentionally or unintentionally, and there can be the odd trademark slip. So it's worth searching on variations of spelling as well. And then various other search terms. The way in which illicit sellers often describe products is different to the genuine product description. And again, translations come in here as well. In terms of image searching, reverse image searching is really helpful, and also looking at the price of the product. That can be a telltale sign as well. So these are all different things that when searched can highlight suspicious listings, which might then later on be confirmed as being illicit. And technology exists for identifying and quantifying worldwide online counterfeiting activity. And if this is something you want to know a little bit more of in terms of what Snapdragon can do, please do contact me afterwards, and I can give you a demo or tell you a little bit more anyway. So once visible, once you've found these listings, the infringements can be prioritized and then challenged and hopefully got rid of. Another important thing that you can do, which can be really helpful, is to test purchase a counterfeit. So buy one and do a detailed comparison. I showed a slide earlier on in the presentation where there was an image of a genuine product and then the counterfeit next to it. And that's a really useful thing. That's the kind of thing that border control and customs find helpful as well, giving them a really easy way to identify what's fake and what's not. And when you've got a really good idea of what a fake is compared to the genuine one, you can then inform your employees and the relevant bodies that you work with. So documenting the differences is really important. But taking that a step further, there's also trap purchasing. And this is the documentation and the photographing of a purchase, but doing it in such a way that it can prove useful if you decide to pursue legal action in the future, because it can potentially be used if the right information has been gathered. It's the documentation that can be used as evidence in a court of law if you're going for civil or criminal proceedings later on. And again, both test purchasing and trap purchasing is something that Snapdragon does. So online channels, I've already shown you this slide, but I thought it was good to come back to these fabulous marketplaces that we have at our fingertips nowadays. All these online channels strictly forbid the sale of counterfeit goods. And by the way, these are not by any stretch of the imagination all of the platforms. These are just a small selection that fitted onto the PowerPoint. There are thousands more, but they all strictly forbid the sale of counterfeit goods. And fakes can be reported and removed through the official channels of the platforms that they're listed on. Different platforms have different channels and ways to work. Some are online, some not, but they've all got ways that you can report something that is infringing your intellectual property rights. And Snapdragon does this on behalf of our clients every day. And we often have listings removed very quickly, sometimes as little as 4 minutes. But you can also report offenders to payment service providers, such as Visa and PayPal, and they can disable payment options to those known to sell counterfeit products. And when it comes to search engines also offer similar facilities. So major search engines have procedures for requesting the removal of adverts linked to counterfeit sites, as do internet service providers and hosting providers as well. And another useful tactic is the sending of takedown notices directly to internet service providers. So the story there very much is where there's a will, there's a way. There is a way. If you've got the intellectual property, there's action that can be taken, and that action can be effective and really pay off. However, a word of warning. When reporting, it is important to be careful. Be careful about what you accuse people of doing. Take advice, if necessary, from an intellectual property attorney or lawyer with regards to writing a cease and desist template, and be very aware of the dangers of groundless threats. So if you wrongly accuse somebody when there is no infringement, because there's no registered intellectual property in that area that's relevant, or the right is invalid in some way, so it might be out of date or whatever, then the person that you have accused, so the aggrieved person, can take the action against you, and the cards can be turned. So that's something to be very mindful of. There is a perception that online action is ineffective unless it is followed up offline, usually because the fake products will always exist. They're sitting in warehouses, they're about to be shipped to different parts of the world. And there is truth in this. But we think that when it comes to fakes on many of the world's busiest e-commerce sites, these products, many of them anyway, are made to order. And by taking down those that target your brand, the factories behind the fakes will be forced to move on to other brands. And when you do consider offline strategies, physical investigations or factory raids and other activities, it can be very costly and time-consuming and mind-boggling. Some of our clients work with other brands who, in a sales point of view, might be their competitors, but when it comes to brand protection, they do work collaboratively. And in any of these instances, online intelligence can help identify the most serious infringers, so that offline defensive efforts can be focused on in a prioritized way and in a way that will be most effective. And we believe it really is worth it. Brands that visibly and vigorously fight to challenge and remove counterfeit goods from online venues often see a dramatic drop in infringements against their brands. Fighting fakes can't be left. It's probably one of the most successful, counterfeiting is probably one of the most successful examples of globalization, and it can't be left. I said at the beginning, it's a huge issue, quite mind-boggling. But hopefully what I've done is to show that there are many things that can be done. And none of us can do this alone. What Snapdragon does is a vital part, but a small part of fighting counterfeits. And we have to work together. We have to work brands and service providers. We have to work with border control and legal teams. We have to work together. And if we do that, hopefully we can make a significant difference. So I think that brings it to the end of things that I'm sort of, yes, presenting, but happy to answer any questions now at all, or start a discussion either way.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Mary. I learned a lot in that session, and I can't believe the figures at the beginning. That's just mind-blowing.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, especially, as you said, it's a global problem, but especially for China. You know, China is quite renowned, notorious even for their fakes, their fake markets, and even online and everything. So yeah, I can't see any questions at the moment. So everybody, please don't shy, send over your questions. And we have Mary for 10 more minutes. So if you have any burning questions that you'd like to ask, please do. But I think we can kick off a discussion. I think, as you said, you listed a lot of the online platforms which actively, you know, they don't allow fakes on their sites, and Alibaba included. And I think, you know, things like Tmall and Taobao, although you can take the fakes down, quite often, I guess what fraudsters might do is take the product off Taobao onto WeChat and things like that. And how is it possible to kind of overcome that when they just keep going offline or onto WeChat? How is there any way that you can do that? So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a really, really good question. And that's exactly how, in a way, they demonstrate that they're very nimble and that they're one step ahead of others behind the scene. And I think the main thing there very much is having a broad brand protection policy. So it's not just limiting it to the e-commerce sites, but being proactive on the e-commerce sites and on the various social media, both closed chat groups like WeChat and so on, but also the open sites like Facebook and Instagram, and being very proactive on those too. And one of the things that we do, and that we do increasingly, is we start to cluster data. So it's about looking at the sellers on certain platforms in certain territories that are also active in other areas. And this is something that they may not present blatantly in terms of their seller name, because that might vary, but it's information that's a little bit more hidden that we can access, that can start to build a picture on who the bigger players are. So I think the main thing in answer to that is about being proactive and continuing to be proactive. There are new sites popping up all the time, and so it's keeping an eye on what's happening there. I hope that helps a little bit.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And also as well, the age-old question of IP and the importance of registering it in China. As we know, well, all over the world, and also China, as we know in China, I think it's a first come, first served.
Yes, that's right.
So yeah, would you like to elaborate a little bit on?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what we say to brands, we work with brands large and small. So we work with some brands who are very, very well established and have got hundreds of trademarks and have already registered their wares in China. But we also work with a lot of SMEs too, who are starting out on the journey, and they think, oh, well, we're British based, or we're US based, or we're Australian based. We don't need to think about China yet. But our advice is very much always, and we're not lawyers, so we can't offer legal advice, but we would always say consider and talk to your legal advisors about registering in China, even if you're not immediately going to start a sales strategy there. If you're manufacturing in China, or you're thinking you might do within 5 years or whatever, register your trademark there, and in various variations as well, potentially. And what you said about China being a first file territory jurisdiction is absolutely crucial. We've worked with brands who have been very successful brands in the US, Australia, Europe, UK, wherever. They've not registered in China, and they've gone to register their trademark in China, only to discover that somebody in China has already registered their brand and is manufacturing and is using all their marketing collateral and so on. And so what ensues is a very difficult decision. Do they ignore it, which is burying their head in the sand, which is probably not the best thing to do ever? Do they tackle it head on with a court case and say, look, we were the first here, we actually started this brand 10 years ago, and you've only sort of popped up in the last 3 years. But then that will involve huge spend, massive drain on time, all that creativity that you want to put into developing your brand is detracted because you're focusing on this draining court case. Or the third thing is, do you just rebrand? And that also is costly and so on. So all of those things can be avoided by saying China is a vital market, and we do need to register intellectual property in China as a priority at the start. So we would always see registering trademarks particularly as a real investment. You've got your marketing spend, you've got your prototypes that you're developing, you're investing in different things, and a vital part of that business is to register IP.
Absolutely, yeah. Or I guess the other option would be to, well, it depends how much of your IP has been compromised, but perhaps buy it off the IP squatter.
Yeah, actually, and there have been, we've had instances of that too, where brands, there's a well-known, it's a high street brand that we've worked with, and they approached their squatters, or the people that were actually infringing their intellectual property rights, and they actually came to a good settlement, and that was very successful. And those sellers have now gone on to become genuine sellers. So that was a real success story. And yeah, it would be good if there was more of that. I think sometimes even the sellers, we've talked about the unassuming consumer buying without really knowing what they're buying and not realizing it's a fake. But there are situations where sellers find themselves in situations where they're not really aware of of what they're doing, and the fact that what they're doing is illegal. So they are often, and can be, willing to work for the actual brand once they realise the errors of their ways. That isn't always the case, certainly not with organised crime, but for some of the smaller players, that can be the case. Yeah, certainly.
We have a question here from Connie.
Oh, great.
She's asking.
Hello, Connie.
Hi, Connie. How much does it cost to register a brand in China?
Oh, that's a very good question. And I would probably say, how long is a piece of string? Sorry to give you that really vague answer. We don't, at Snapdragon, we don't do the actual registration ourselves. And this is where we would say, talk to a lawyer. Certainly, it depends on your brand. It depends on how many products you've got in your range, how many different trademarks you want to register, and how many different classes. There are different ways that you can register trademarks. So it really is something, the answer I'm afraid is it depends. But we know a lot of fantastic trademark attorneys and lawyers, and if you wanted us to introduce you to some folks, we could certainly do that, and they would be able to give you an idea. Registering a trademark need not necessarily be difficult. It's something that a lot of brands, when starting out, do themselves. So that's something that's also possible, but not everybody has the sort of mindset to sort of want to do that, and they feel much more reassured if they go through some legal advisors. So that's probably what I would suggest, but I'm afraid I can't answer the question on how much it costs, because there are so many variables. But I would say, depending which territory you're in, what currency you work with, certainly, registering a trademark can start from a few £100s. It's not expensive in the grand scheme of things. But the issue is that, as I said, you can't get a global trademark. You have to be very selective with your territories and classes and so on. And the classes in China are also different to the rest of the world. So that's where I think the legal advice comes in that can be helpful. I hope that helps.
Absolutely. And I guess it very much varies across sectors and products. And I imagine perhaps, I don't know, food and drink products, there's a lot more categories, or things like that. So yeah, it's very much depends on the answer to that question. Any more questions for anyone? I can't see any more in the box just now. But well, we're almost at 10:30 at the moment anyway. And if anyone does have any more questions that pop into their heads after this, I will be doing a follow-up email with all of Mary's contact details. So please do reach out, and all of the details about Snapdragon monitoring, how you can access their website and see more of their services and the sectors that they specialize in. And yeah, thank you everyone so much for coming. Thank you, Mary, for your time this morning and your expertise.
Pleasure. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you very much, CBBC, and to everybody who's given their time to attend. And as Maxime said, please contact me by email or phone. And even if I don't know the answers and can't help, I can certainly point you in the direction of someone who can. So hopefully that will help.
Absolutely. And I guess if people can email you to get the slides, if they like access to slides or any other.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Great. And yeah, tune in next time, next webinar. And thanks again, everyone. I hope that everyone is well, by the way, and coping and not going too crazy. I hope that you can all get outside and enjoy a bit of the sun today. And yeah, stay safe, everyone. Same to you, Mary, as well. Thank you all. Goodbye.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.